3 weeks after my new boss arrived, I lost everything I'd built over 8 years. My team, my reputation, and eventually, my job. Not because I failed, not because I slacked off, but because he needed a spot for his screw-up of a brother. And I was the easiest one to erase. My name's Jack Rennan. I'm 34 years old, born and raised just outside Columbus, Ohio, and until last winter, I thought I had a solid grip on my life. I've always believed in working hard, showing up early, and letting my work speak for itself. I wasn't a manager who barked orders from behind glass. I was in the trenches, hands-on, running operations like clockwork. I didn't chase promotions or play politics. I just did my job well, and figured the rest would fall into place. For a long time, it did. I had a team I trusted, a role that mattered, and a sense of pride every time I walked into the office. That is, until Darren Kinley showed up. It was January when he came in, all polished shoes and buzzwords. There'd been whispers for weeks, leadership changes, realignment talks, new blood from corporate. Still, I wasn't worried. I'd survived shifts like this before. I had the numbers, the tenure, the results. But Darren? He was a different breed. 35 at most, all confidence and flash. The kind of guy who said, circle back and synergy like they were nouns that meant something. He barely introduced himself before scheduling back-to-back one-on-ones with all the senior staff. My meeting with him lasted 13 minutes. He skimmed my resume, nodded a few times, then leaned back in his chair and said, "You've been here a while, huh?" I should have known then. The first changes were subtle. He started showing up to team huddles unannounced, standing quietly in the back, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room like he was auditing the air. Then came the reassignments. Projects I had shepherded from concept to execution suddenly pulled from my docket and handed to people who had no business leading them. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't even copied on the handoff emails. My title hadn't changed, but my responsibilities evaporated overnight. I pulled Darren aside one morning, trying to keep things professional. I asked if there was something I wasn't doing, something I needed to adjust. He gave me that corporate smirk. You know the one, all lips, no warmth, and said, "Nothing like that, Jack, just tightening things up." Then he clapped me on the shoulder like we were old drinking buddies. "Don't worry, you're solid." But I was worried, because I'd seen this play out before. People slowly erased from relevance, their purpose chipped away one task at a time, until they were little more than a name on a spreadsheet. The day they took my team was the day it stopped feeling like bad luck and started feeling personal. I walked into the office, same as always, and found out from an intern that my direct reports now answered to someone else. No meeting, no notice, no explanation, just gone. The guy they were reporting to was fresh off a mid-level management course and had once asked me what a Gantt chart was. And right around then, I started hearing the name Austin Kinley, Darren's brother. The first time I heard the name Austin Kinley, it came from Shelby in HR. She didn't mean to say it. It just slipped out during one of those water cooler moments when everyone's pretending not to gossip, but everyone is. "Apparently Darren's bringing in his brother," she said, stirring her coffee. "Some kind of consulting role." Then her eyes widened like she realized she'd said too much, and she half laughed. "But who knows, right?" I nodded, but inside, something shifted. That name, Kinley, it wasn't exactly common. I tucked it away. Austin showed up the following week. No introduction email, no org chart update. Just appeared one morning with a guest badge and an all-access security pass clipped to his belt. He looked like Darren, but rougher around the edges. Same jawline, same overconfidence, but without the polish. His shirt was wrinkled, his laptop still had plastic wrap on it, and he didn't know how to connect to the internal Wi-Fi. But he had a corner desk reserved in Darren's office, and by noon, he was already giving instructions to my former team. I tried to play it cool. It's America. You see nepotism in every second-tier manager's cousin suddenly heading strategy. But what hit me like a gut punch was how fast Austin moved in. He started showing up in my old meetings, taking credit for work he didn't even understand. He pitched a workflow integration overhaul that was basically just renaming a shared drive. The worst part? People played along. My old team nodded in agreement, even when he was wrong. They laughed at his bad jokes. I could see it on their faces. Fear. They were just trying to survive like I was. A week later, I found myself sitting across from Darren again, in that same glass office with its fake wood desk and digital picture frame looping stock images of mountain peaks and business buzzwords. I didn't go in angry, I just wanted to know what was happening. Austin seems to be taking over a lot of the work I used to handle, I said carefully. Just wondering how you see our roles overlapping. Darren didn't even blink. Jack, he said, leaning back. Austin's got a great instinct for this stuff. I brought him in to shake things up, get a fresh perspective. He's not stepping on your toes, just filling in some gaps. What gaps? I asked, more sharply than I meant. He smiled again. That same dead smile. Things change, Jack. Don't take it personally. But I did take it personally. Because it wasn't just about pride. It was about watching everything I'd built get handed over to someone who hadn't earned a single ounce of it. Someone whose only qualification was sharing a last name with the boss. And the more I pushed back, the more invisible I became. My calendar dried up. My inbox slowed. I wasn't invited to planning sessions, and when I dropped by unannounced, I got polite nods and tight-lipped smiles. I went home that Friday and sat in the dark for a long time. I didn't even take my coat off. I just sat there on the edge of the couch thinking, this is how they get you. Not with a pink slip, not with a screaming match. Just slowly, until you're a ghost in your own life. That was the night I decided. I wasn't going out quietly. The following Monday, I started documenting everything. Every task Austin botched, every meeting I was excluded from, every vague response from Darren. I opened a private folder on my personal cloud, labeled it Covering My Ass, and updated it daily. Call it paranoia, call it survival instinct. But I'd seen how these stories ended for people like me. You get pushed to the margins until you're either irrelevant or angry enough to be labeled difficult, and once they've slapped that label on you, you're done. I didn't talk about what I was doing. Not to coworkers, not to friends. It was just me, a spreadsheet, and a growing sense of betrayal. I kept copies of reports I'd written but no longer got credit for. I saved versions of Austin's revisions, most of which were just my words with different font sizes. I screen-capped emails where he took credit for projects he didn't even attend kickoff meetings for. It was easy to spot the manipulation once I looked closely. But the worst part? Darren was actively enabling it. Some days, I'd sit in on meetings, invited as a courtesy, and listen as Austin stumbled through talking points I'd written, mispronounced half the terms, then glanced at Darren like a kid checking if his big brother was still proud. Darren always was. Always gave him a nod or a nice job at the end, even when it was absolute garbage. My stomach churned with every word, but I kept a neutral face. I had to. Then came the performance review. It was March now, and I'd already accepted that something was coming. What I didn't expect was how calculated it would be. Darren scheduled it last minute, late Friday afternoon, end of the quarter, the kind of time slot meant for burying things. I walked in, clipboard in hand, mentally prepared to hear the usual vague feedback. But this wasn't vague. This was a hit job. He started with a sigh. Jack, I've been reviewing your output over the last few months, and I've got some concerns. No specifics, just concerns. He said my leadership had become less visible, that I wasn't showing the same drive as before, that there was a lack of collaboration with newer strategic stakeholders. I knew what that last one meant. I wasn't playing nice with his brother. I stayed calm, asked for examples, metrics, anything. He dodged, said it was more of a perception issue, and that I needed to adapt to new dynamics. It wasn't a review, it was a setup. I left that meeting shaking, not from fear, but from rage. Quiet, concentrated rage. I'd bled for that job, given up weekends, missed birthdays, covered for incompetent execs. And now I was being painted as the problem. For what? For daring to question the frat boy nepotism parade? I sat in my car for an hour that night, gripping the wheel, and that's when I made the decision. If they were going to shove me out, I'd make damn sure they had to look me in the eye when they did it. No crawling away, no ghosting into silence. I was going to make this uncomfortable for them. Because if there's one thing I'd learned in corporate America, it's that they count on your silence. A few weeks passed, and I started playing a dangerous game. I pretended not to notice. I showed up on time, nodded in meetings, even offered fake smiles to Austin like nothing had changed. But under the surface, I was watching everything. I'd spent years learning how this place ran, who talked to whom, where the bodies were buried, how the systems worked. And more importantly, how to follow the money. It turns out Austin wasn't just bad at his job, he was reckless. I started seeing the cracks in his strategic input projects, budgets that didn't add up, vendor contracts missing proper sign-off. One afternoon, I sat down with Samir from finance, casually mentioning a purchase order Austin had greenlit. Samir raised an eyebrow. "That one?" he said. "Didn't even have a cost center attached. Thought it was some executive's pet project." That was all I needed to hear. Over the next few days, I built a report. I didn't embellish, didn't exaggerate, I just compiled the truth. A tidy, brutal collection of numbers, timelines, email threads, and procedural violations. I highlighted misused funds, decisions made without documentation, and multiple breaches of internal policy. I added screenshots, pulled timestamps, and even looped in comments from compliance training that directly contradicted Austin's actions. It wasn't a whistleblower package, but it was close, and it had teeth. I printed one copy. Old school, yes, but paper carries a weight that emails don't. I sealed it in a manila envelope and left it on the desk of Morgan Lyle, the VP of Operations, early one morning before the office got busy. Morgan was old school, too. 30 years in the company. Crusty as hell, but smart and fair. I knew he wouldn't ignore it. Then I waited. The change was subtle at first. Morgan showed up to a few meetings he'd never attended before. Quiet, eyes narrowed. He'd watch Austin talk, then glance around the room like he was reading faces. I stayed silent. Let the silence do the work. A few days later, I heard Austin had been pulled into a closed-door meeting with legal. His swagger was still there, but it was dulled now, the way a blade looks before it snaps. That Friday, Darren called me in again. He didn't sit, just stood there behind his desk, arms crossed. "You went to Morgan," he said flatly. No small talk this time, no smirking. I met his eyes. "I submitted a report outlining operational risks." "You think this protects you?" he asked. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He exhaled, jaw tight. "We're restructuring again. You'll be notified by Monday." That was it. No thank you. No explanation. Just a veiled warning and an exit plan. But he was too late. Because now this wasn't about saving my job. It was about exposing the rot they thought they could hide behind job titles and family favors. And I wasn't done yet. Monday morning, I was called into HR at Shelby. Same Shelby who'd accidentally dropped Austin's name weeks ago, sat stiffly behind the desk, flanked by a man I'd never seen before. He wore a neutral-colored suit and didn't smile. "This is Rob from legal," Shelby said, voice strained. "We're conducting a formal offboarding conversation today." She said, "Offboarding," like it was a spa appointment. They handed me the paperwork. Termination effective immediately. 2 weeks severance. And a polite clause about organizational misalignment. I flipped through it slowly, more for show than anything. I'd already prepared myself for this. Darren had made it clear on Friday that the walls were closing in. But what he hadn't counted on, what none of them had, was that I'd already pulled the pin and tossed the grenade back in their direction. I didn't argue, I didn't beg, I signed nothing. Just stood up, shook Shelby's hand, nodded at Rob, and walked out the same way I came in 8 years ago, head up, shoulders straight. I didn't pack my things. Let them mail it. That building didn't deserve a sentimental goodbye. But the story didn't end with my badge drop-off. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Morgan Lyle. He didn't do small talk. "It's done," he said. "You were right." Apparently, legal had opened a formal internal audit based on my report. Austin's consulting expenses had flagged several red lines, improper authorizations, policy breaches, and worst of all, an outside vendor he'd greenlit was directly connected to a shell company owned by one of his friends. Classic kickback play. It wasn't just unethical. It was potentially criminal. Morgan didn't say what happened behind closed doors, but I could piece it together. Austin was quietly removed, resigned for personal reasons. Darren, stripped of his oversight authority, was shuffled into a non-client-facing role. A hollow title. No team, no budget, just a fall from grace, the kind that happens in slow motion and tastes like metal. They didn't fire him, of course, not right away. Corporate America rarely does. But they took his power, and in that world, that's a death sentence. "You made some noise, Jack," Morgan said before hanging up. "Appreciate that." Funny word, appreciate. Not quite, thank you, not quite, we were wrong. But it was enough. A week later, I got a message on LinkedIn from someone on my old team. Just a short note. "We miss you. You were right to fight." I stared at it for a while, then closed my laptop and sat in the quiet. I was unemployed. Blacklisted, maybe. But I was still me. Still the guy who did things the right way, even when it cost me. And I'd learned something most people don't until it's too late. Sometimes, the only way to keep your soul intact is to burn the bridge behind you and never look back. 3 months. That's how long I went without a paycheck. Long enough to feel the pressure in your chest when the rent clears and the groceries cost more than your weekly unemployment deposit. But not long enough to break me. I spent that time sharpening every dull blade I'd let rust while I was loyal to people who saw me as disposable. Updated my resume, got my certifications current, brushed up on tech stacks I hadn't touched in years. More than that, I networked. Not the fake kind, not the LinkedIn handshake and go kind. I reached out to the people I'd helped over the years. Quietly, humbly. "Hey, I'm on the market. Let me know if you hear of anything." The replies came slowly, then all at once. One call came from Evan Brooks, a guy I'd worked with years ago on a tough logistics rollout. He was running operations at a fast-growing startup now. Said he'd heard what happened. Said he wanted someone on his team who actually gave a damn about doing things right. I started as director of ops a month later. Smaller team, faster pace, but full autonomy. My fingerprints were on every workflow, every process, every decision that mattered. Evan had one rule: no politics, just impact. I could breathe again. It took time, but the bitterness faded. The anger gave way to clarity. I'd spent 8 years thinking loyalty was a one-way street. It wasn't. It was a loop. only meaningful if it came back around. What Darren and Austin taught me, what corporate America taught me, is that some people will always rise through shortcuts. But that rise doesn't last. Eventually, they get caught in their own reflection. 6 months into my new job, I got an email. Company name redacted. Just a short note from HR. We're conducting background reference checks for Darren Kinley. He has listed you as a former colleague and supervisor. Please confirm your availability. I stared at it for a few minutes, coffee cooling in my hand. Then I replied. Kept it factual, professional, didn't slander. But I told the truth about the timeline, the restructuring, the unqualified hires, the oversight issues. My signature line read, "Available to discuss further by phone at your convenience." Never heard back. I don't know where Darren is now. Don't care, really. Last I heard, Austin was pursuing independent ventures, which is code for unemployable with a fake LLC. As for me, I'm good, better than good. I get home in time for dinner. I sleep through the night. And most of all, I know now that if you're going to bet your name on a job, make sure it's a place that values more than who your brother is. Because loyalty without integrity is just quiet self-betrayal, and I'm done betraying myself.